Zara Blake had always dreamed of joining the Galactic Security Force, but she never imagined her first assignment would involve babysitting 3 aliens who treated intergalactic law enforcement like a cosmic joke. Standing in the briefing room aboard the GSF cruiser Starbound Justice, she watched her new teammates with a mixture of fascination and growing concern. Captain Vorthak, their squad leader, was a 7-foot-tall reptilian who looked like someone had crossed a velociraptor with a soap opera actor. His scales shimmered an iridescent green, and he had this annoying habit of pausing dramatically before every other sentence, as if the universe itself was hanging on his every word. "Ah, the human recruit arrives," Vorthak announced, his forked tongue flicking out as he gestured grandly toward Zara. "Welcome to Nebula's finest, the most legendary squad in the entire GSF." Glix, their resident hacker, barely looked up from the 17 different data tablets he had floating around his insectoid form. His compound eyes reflected the screen's glow, and his 6 arms moved in a constant blur of typing, swiping, and what Zara could only assume was stress-eating synthetic protein cubes. The bug-like alien's chittering could be heard from across the room. "She's the one from Earth, right?" Glix asked between rapid-fire keystrokes. "The species that still uses chemical rockets and thinks artificial intelligence will destroy them. Oh, this should be entertaining." The third member of their illustrious team was Torvin, a walking boulder who spoke exclusively in monotone and apparently found everything in the universe equally fascinating, which is to say, not at all. His rock-like exterior shifted slightly as he turned toward Zara, pebbles falling from his shoulders. "Human confirmed," Torvin stated flatly. "Species survival rate in first missions, statistically concerning." "Thanks for the warm welcome, guys," Zara muttered, adjusting her standard-issue GSF uniform. She had trained for 3 years at the academy, graduated top of her class in xenobiology and tactical operations, and somehow ended up with the squad that treated their jobs like a traveling comedy show. Vorthak spread his arms wide, scales catching the overhead lights. "Do not take offense, small mammal. We are simply experienced in the ways of the galaxy. You will learn much from us. If she survives long enough," Glix added helpfully, not looking up from his screens. "Did you know humans have an average lifespan of only 80 years? That's barely enough time to understand one solar system, let alone police 17 sectors." Zara was beginning to understand why Nebula's finest had the highest turnover rate in the GSF. Their reputation for solving cases was legendary, sure, but their reputation for respecting new recruits was apparently non-existent. "So," she said, trying to steer the conversation towards something productive, "what's our mission brief?" Vorthak activated the holographic display with a flourish that would have made a theater director proud. A green and blue planet materialized in the center of the room, rotating slowly as data streams cascaded around it. "Behold, Verdania," he announced, pausing for what Zara assumed was dramatic effect, a peaceful agricultural world on the outer rim. Population roughly 50,000 farmers, fishermen, and people who apparently have nothing better to do than grow vegetables. Glix's chittering intensified as he pulled up additional files. "Reports of bandit activity have been trickling in for the past 3 weeks. Livestock theft, crop destruction, the usual small-time nonsense. Local authorities requested GSF assistance because they're overwhelmed by what appears to be, wait for it, organized cattle rustling." "Cattle rustling. Cattle rustling," Torvin repeated in his characteristic monotone. "Threat level, minimal. Expected resistance, negligible. Mission difficulty, insulting to our capabilities." Zara studied the planetary data, noting the dense forest coverage and unusual wildlife classifications. "What about the ecosystem reports? Some of these biological readings look interesting." "Interesting how?" Vorthak asked, though his tone suggested he couldn't care less. "Well, the biomass indicators are off the charts for a settled world. And look at these predator classifications. Some of these species are marked as unconfirmed but potentially dangerous." Glix finally looked up from his tablets, all 6 arms pausing mid-gesture. "You're worried about space cows and alien squirrels. Humans really are as paranoid as the databases suggest. I'm just saying maybe we should review the ecological survey data before we what?" Vorthak interrupted, scales rippling with what might have been amusement. "Prepare for battle against militant farmers. Ready our weapons for an epic confrontation with organized agriculture." Torvin's rocky form shifted slightly. "Statistical probability of mission requiring actual combat skills, 0.03%. Statistical probability of human recruit over analyzing routine assignment, 97.4%. Look," Zara tried again. "I just think proper preparation is the hallmark of inexperience masquerading as wisdom." Vorthak finished grandly. "Trust in your superiors, little mammal. We have handled far more dangerous assignments than wayward farm equipment and disgruntled vegetable merchants." Within the hour, they were aboard their transport ship, The Cosmic Dancer, heading toward the Verdania system. Zara spent the journey reviewing every file she could access about their destination, while her teammates seemed more interested in discussing their shore leave plans and placing bets on how quickly they could wrap up this embarrassingly simple assignment. 20 credits says, "We're done in 6 hours. Glix chittered. "Make it 4 hours. Vorthak countered. "I have dinner reservations on Nexus Prime tomorrow." Zara kept her concerns to herself and continued reading. The Cosmic Dancer broke through Verdania's atmosphere like a falling star, and Zara had to admit the planet was breathtaking. Rolling emerald hills stretched to the horizon, dotted with pristine farmsteads and crossed by rivers that sparkled like liquid silver. Ancient forests carpeted the mountainsides, their canopies so thick they looked like green storm clouds that had decided to take root. "Well, would you look at that," Vorthak said as they descended toward the primary settlement. "Paradise itself, I can practically smell the pastoral tranquility. Atmospheric composition is optimal," Torvin reported. "Oxygen levels compatible with 93% of known species. Temperature moderate, weather patterns stable. Threat assessment remains boring." But Zara was studying her scanner readings with growing unease. The life sign indicators were going haywire. Dense concentrations of biomass moved through the forests in patterns that seemed almost coordinated. And the settlements below looked too quiet for midday on an agricultural world. They landed in the town square of Haven's Rest, the planet's modest capital. The moment they stepped off their ship, Zara felt it. That primal sensation that every human carries buried in their DNA, the one that screams when apex predators are watching from the shadows. Her teammates, apparently lacking such inconvenient evolutionary baggage, spread out immediately. Right then, Vorthak announced, striking a heroic pose despite the complete absence of anyone to witness it. "Let us divide and conquer. Cover more ground, solve this mystery faster, return home in time for dinner." "Bad idea," Zara said immediately. "Standard protocol calls for maintaining team cohesion in unfamiliar environments." Glix was already setting up a mobile command post near the town's communication hub, his multiple arms working with caffeine-fueled efficiency. "Protocols are for species that haven't figured out faster than light travel yet. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? An angry farmer throws a space turnip at us." "The worst that could happen," Zara muttered, checking her sidearm, "is that we don't know what the worst that could happen actually is." Within minutes, they had scattered like seeds in the wind. Vorthak strutted toward the administrative buildings to interview local officials. Glix burrowed into the settlement's data networks to trace communication patterns. Torvin lumbered off to examine what he called evidence of agricultural-based criminal activity, which apparently meant looking at damaged fence posts. Zara found herself alone in the town center, surrounded by the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Not peaceful quiet. Predatory quiet. The kind that happens when every small animal in a 10-mile radius decides simultaneously that being very, very still is the key to staying alive. She activated her communicator. "Base, this is Blake. The settlement appears, abandoned isn't the right word. More like everyone's hiding." Static answered her. "Vorthak, do you copy?" More static. "Glix, Torvin." Her communication array was functioning perfectly. The problem was that nothing was responding. Not her teammates, not their ship, not even the GSF monitoring station they had established in orbit. The buildings around her looked normal enough. Fresh paint, tended gardens, laundry hanging on lines. But there were no people. No sounds of daily life. No indication that anyone had been here recently. Despite clear signs of recent habitation, Zara drew her weapon and started moving toward the forest edge where her scanner had detected the strongest life sign concentrations. Every instinct she possessed was screaming at her to get back to the ship, call for backup, and approach this situation with about 50 more heavily armed Marines. Unfortunately, she was beginning to suspect that getting back to the ship might not be an option anymore. As she reached the tree line, something large crashed through the underbrush about 30 meters to her left. Then something else crashed through the brush to her right. And behind her. The sounds were too coordinated to be coincidental. Too purposeful to be natural animal behavior. Zara Blake, rookie space marine, and apparently the only member of Nebula's finest with functional survival instincts, realized she was being hunted. The attack came from 3 directions at once, which would have been impressive tactical planning if Zara hadn't been expecting it for the past 10 minutes. What she hadn't been expecting was that the attackers weren't the usual suspects her team had prepared for. These weren't disgruntled farmers with pitchforks and righteous indignation. These weren't even desperate locals driven to banditry by economic hardship. The figures that emerged from the forest were professional soldiers wearing military-grade combat armor painted in crimson and black, carrying energy weapons that probably cost more than most planets' annual defense budgets. Well, 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 called out the apparent leader, a scarred humanoid with cybernetic implants covering half his face. What do we have here? A lost little lamb from the Galactic Security Force. Zara kept her weapon trained on the speaker while tracking the positions of his 6 companions through her peripheral vision. I'm guessing you're not the local welcoming committee. Oh, we're very welcoming, the leader laughed, his voice distorted by vocal enhancers. We welcome anyone foolish enough to interfere with Crimson Claw operations. We welcome them to an early grave. The Crimson Claw. Zara's blood ran cold. These weren't small-time bandits harassing farmers. The Crimson Claw was one of the most ruthless pirate organizations in the Outer Rim, known for strip mining entire worlds and eliminating any witnesses who might report their activities to the authorities. Where are my teammates? She demanded, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. The big dramatic lizard, the jittery bug, the walking pile of rocks. Another pirate stepped forward, this one sporting military tattoos and carrying what looked like a modified plasma cannon. They're enjoying our hospitality back at base camp. Turns out when you split up your forces in hostile territory, you make it really easy for professionals to pick you off one by one. Zara's mind raced through tactical options. 7 armed pirates, military-grade equipment, superior positioning, and her teammates captured. The math was not encouraging. You know, the leader continued conversationally. We weren't expecting the GSF to send anyone competent. The intelligence reports said you were just another bureaucratic cleanup crew. Imagine our surprise when we monitored your approach and realized we were dealing with the famous Nebula's finest. Famous for what exactly? Zara asked, trying to buy time while scanning for escape routes. Famous for being the most overconfident idiots in the galaxy, laughed the pirate with the plasma cannon. Famous for walking into traps like tourists wandering into traffic. Your captain actually introduced himself to our advanced scout and asked for directions to the local authority building. Vorthak did what now? Oh, it gets better, the leader grinned, revealing teeth that had been replaced with sharpened metal implants. Your hacker friend tried to access our communication network thinking it was the local government system. Spent 20 minutes downloading our complete operational files while chattering about how primitive Outer Rim security protocols are. Zara closed her eyes briefly. Of course they did. Of course her teammates had bumbled directly into the enemy's hands while she was the one being cautious and paranoid. And the rock creature, the leader continued with obvious amusement. He walked directly up to our equipment depot and started cataloging our mining gear. Apparently, he wanted to document the evidence of agricultural equipment theft for his report. Mining gear, Zara repeated, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. You're not here for the crops or livestock. You're here to strip mine the planet. Very good, little human. Yes, Verdania sits on one of the richest deposits of rare earth minerals in this sector. The farming communities are just convenient cover while we establish our operations. Once we've extracted everything valuable, we'll eliminate the witnesses and move on to the next target. The pirate with the plasma cannon shifted position, flanking her left side. Which brings us to you, rookie. We can't have any GSF personnel reporting back about our activities. Nothing personal, you understand, just business. Zara's tactical computer was running constant calculations, and none of them were encouraging. 7 professional soldiers with superior firepower in an ambush position. Her teammates captured, and probably being used as leverage. No backup coming because her communications were jammed. But she was human. And humans had spent millennia learning how to survive as prey animals before they became predators themselves. Sometimes the best tactical option wasn't to fight, sometimes it was to run like hell and live to fight another day. Before you kill me, she said, slowly lowering her weapon, I have to ask, how long have you been operating here? 3 months, the leader replied proudly. Long enough to map every mineral deposit, eliminate the local resistance, and prepare for full-scale extraction. And in those 3 months, how much time have you spent in the deep forests? The pirates exchanged glances. What kind of question is that? The kind that might save your lives, Zara said, then dove sideways behind a boulder as the forest around them exploded into chaos. Something massive crashed through the trees behind the pirates, something that made sounds like a freight train having an argument with a thunderstorm. The Crimson Claw soldiers spun around, weapons raised, just in time to see several tons of very unhappy local wildlife, bearing down on them with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for tax collectors and door-to-door salespeople. Zara used the distraction to sprint toward the deeper forest, her human survival instincts finally proving their worth as she disappeared into the undergrowth, while the pirates discovered that Verdania's ecosystem had some very strong opinions about uninvited guests. 3 hours later, Zara had managed to work her way through the forest canopy to a position overlooking the Crimson Claw base camp. What she saw made her stomach drop into her boots. This wasn't some ramshackle bandit operation. The pirates had established a full military compound complete with defensive perimeters, automated sentries, and enough heavy equipment to level a small city. At the center of the camp, 3 very familiar figures sat in an electrified containment field that hummed with enough voltage to barbecue a shuttlecraft. Vorthak was gesticulating dramatically even in captivity, probably delivering some sort of heroic monologue to his captors. Glix appeared to be having a nervous breakdown, all 6 arms twitching as he muttered calculations that nobody was listening to. Torvin sat perfectly still, which for a rock creature could mean anything from stoic acceptance of fate to tactical planning. 37 armed pirates, Zara whispered to herself, counting the visible personnel. Automated defense systems, energy barriers, and my teammates are sitting in the middle of what's basically a militarized death trap. She activated her emergency communicator, hoping to reach the GSF orbital station, but the jamming field was still active. Even if she could get a message through, backup would take at least 6 hours to arrive. Her teammates didn't have 6 hours. Zara spent the next hour conducting reconnaissance, mapping patrol routes and identifying weak points in the camp's defenses. The pirates were professional, she had to give them credit for that. But they were also arrogant. They had established their base in a forest clearing, cutting down everything within a 100-meter radius to create clear fields of fire. What they hadn't done was pay attention to what lived in the trees they had left standing. As evening approached, Zara began her infiltration attempt. She had managed to disable 2 perimeter sensors, and was working on a third when the first scream echoed through the camp. Then another. Then what sounded like someone trying to yell tactical commands while being chased by a very large, very angry lawnmower. Through her scope, she watched chaos erupt in the pirate camp. Several guards were running toward the eastern perimeter, weapons drawn, shouting about contact with unknown hostiles. In the confusion, she managed to slip past the outer defenses and work her way toward the containment area. That's when she encountered her first Verdanian Thornback. The creature looked like someone had crossed a porcupine with a tank and then decided it needed more teeth. It stood about 4 feet tall, covered in razor-sharp quills that glinted in the setting sun, and it was currently engaged in what appeared to be a staring contest with Zara from about 10 meters away. "Nice, whatever you are," Zara whispered, freezing in place. "I'm just passing through. No need for violence." The Thornback tilted its head, studying her with intelligent golden eyes. Then it made a sound like a cat purring, if cats were the size of motorcycles, and purred through vocal cords made of gravel. "Oh, you're actually kind of cute," Zara realized, slowly reaching into her pack. "Are you hungry?" She had been carrying emergency rations designed to be nutritionally compatible with most known life forms. The Thornback approached cautiously, as she offered a protein bar, sniffed it delicately, then devoured it in one bite before nuzzling against her leg like an oversized, heavily armed puppy. "Okay, that's unexpected," Zara murmured, scratching behind what she hoped were the creature's ears. The Thornback's purring intensified, and she realized it was making a specific pattern of sounds, almost like it was trying to communicate. That's when she heard the voices approaching. "Search Grid 7 Alpha," someone was barking orders. Whatever spooked the perimeter guards came from this direction. "Kill anything that moves." Zara pressed herself against a tree, the Thornback crouching beside her with its quills flattened against its body. 2 pirates emerged from the undergrowth, scanning the area with thermal imaging gear. "Motion detectors are going crazy," one of them complained. "This whole forest is crawling with something." "Command says the local wildlife is harmless," his partner replied. "Probably just got startled by our mining operations." The Thornback beside Zara made a sound that could only be described as insulting. If she didn't know better, she would have sworn the creature was offended by being called harmless. The pirates moved past their hiding spot, and Zara was about to continue toward the containment area when she felt the ground vibrating under her feet. Not mechanical vibrations. Footsteps. Very large footsteps approaching from multiple directions. The Thornback suddenly stood up, its golden eyes fixed on something behind the trees. It made a series of rapid clicking sounds, almost like it was having a conversation with something Zara couldn't see. That's when the clicking sounds were answered. From the forest around them came a chorus of responses. Clicks, growls, purrs, and sounds that Zara's human brain couldn't even categorize. The undergrowth rustled as shapes moved between the trees, large shapes that made the Thornback look like a household pet. "Oh," Zara breathed, understanding flooding through her. "You weren't alone, you were the scout." The Thornback looked up at her with what she could only interpret as approval, then made another series of clicking sounds toward the forest. The response was immediate and unmistakable. Something was coming. Something big. Multiple somethings actually. Zara crept forward to get a better view of the pirate camp, the Thornback padding silently beside her. What she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about apex predators, pack behavior, and the fundamental nature of intelligent life in the universe. Standing at the edge of the tree line, partially hidden in shadow, was the largest land predator she had ever seen. It stood at least 12 feet tall at the shoulder, with a body that seemed to be part wolf, part bear, and part something that evolution had specifically designed to make hardened space pirates reconsider their career choices. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part was that it was looking directly at her with eyes that showed unmistakable intelligence. And behind it, barely visible in the darkness, she could make out the shapes of at least a dozen more creatures just like it. The Verdanian Titan wolf, according to her mental catalog of the planetary survey data. Apex predator, pack hunter, intelligence level listed as unconfirmed but potentially significant. As Zara watched, frozen in a mixture of terror and fascination, the massive creature stepped forward into the fading light. Its eyes never left hers as it approached with fluid, silent grace that defied its enormous size. 20 feet away, it stopped and sat down like a well-trained dog. Then it tilted its head and made a sound that was unmistakably questioning. The Thornback beside her chirped once and scampered over to the Titan wolf, which lowered its massive head to nuzzle the smaller creature affectionately. "Your family," Zara realized, her voice barely a whisper. "You're all family." The Titan wolf's attention returned to her, and this time she was certain she saw recognition in its gaze. Not just awareness, but understanding. It had been watching her, studying her behavior with the Thornback, evaluating her intentions. And apparently, she had passed some sort of test. The great creature rose to its feet and padded closer, each step deliberate and careful. When it reached her position, it lowered its massive head until they were at eye level, studying her with an intelligence that made her skin prickle with awareness. Then in a gesture that would have seemed impossible if she hadn't witnessed it herself, the Titan wolf gently touched its nose to her forehead in what could only be interpreted as acceptance. "Pack friend," she whispered, somehow knowing that was the right term. "You're accepting me as pack friend." The creature's response was a low rumble that she felt in her bones, and suddenly the forest around them was alive with movement as the rest of the pack emerged from the shadows. Zara Blake, rookie space marine, and apparently the first human to be adopted by an apex predator pack, realized that the Crimson Claw pirates were about to have a very bad evening. What happened next would later be recorded in GSF tactical manuals as the most unconventional rescue operation in galactic history, though the official reports would carefully omit any mention of interspecies pack bonding or the philosophical implications of apex predator intelligence. The Titan wolf beside Zara made a series of low vocalizations that sounded like distant thunder mixed with a diesel engine having philosophical discussions. The response from the forest was immediate and coordinated. Shapes began moving through the trees with purpose and precision that would have made military strategists weep with envy. "You're not just hunters," Zara whispered in amazement. "You're tactical planners." The great creature's eyes met hers again, and she could swear she saw approval in that ancient gaze. Then it turned toward the pirate camp and made a sound that could only be described as deeply disapproving. The attack began with what the pirates would later describe in their very brief testimonies before being shipped off to maximum security detention facilities as the trees themselves coming alive with malevolent intent. Thornbacks emerged from the undergrowth like living missile systems, their quills finding gaps in armor with surgical precision. The pirates' energy weapons proved remarkably ineffective against creatures that had evolved to hunt prey much faster and more dangerous than bipedal tool users with anger management issues. But the Thornbacks were just the opening act. The Verdanian Grove Stalkers descended from the canopy like shadows with teeth, moving through the camp's defensive positions with fluid grace that made the pirates' tactical training look like amateur theater. These creatures were built for stealth and precision strikes, standing about 8 feet tall with natural camouflage that shifted to match their surroundings. "Contact, contact," screamed one of the pirates into his communicator. "We're under attack by unknown hostiles. Request immediate." His transmission was cut short when a Grove Stalker materialized beside him and gently but firmly removed his weapon. The creature then patted him on the head with what appeared to be fond condescension before zip-tying his hands behind his back with restraints that had definitely come from the pirate's own equipment supplies. But even the Grove Stalkers paled in comparison to the Titan wolves. When the pack finally revealed themselves, the remaining pirates stopped shooting and started praying to whatever deities their various species favored. 12 creatures, each the size of a small building, emerged from the forest with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of intelligence, planning, and a very thorough understanding of small unit tactics. The lead Titan wolf, Zara's newfound packmate, approached the containment field holding her teammates with delicate care. One massive paw touched the energy barrier, and the creature tilted its head as if analyzing the technology. Then it looked back at Zara and made an inquiring sound. You want to know how to turn it off safely, she realized. Without hurting the people inside, the creature nodded. Actually nodded, like a human would. The philosophical implications of that gesture would keep xenobiologists arguing for decades. Zara approached the control panel, keeping one eye on the surrender negotiations happening throughout the camp. The Verdanian wildlife had systematically disarmed every pirate without causing any permanent injuries, which showed a level of restraint that most military forces could learn from. "Okay, big guy," she said to the Titan wolf as she worked on the containment field controls. "The energy matrix is designed to collapse inward if tampered with, so I need to reverse the polarity and then there." The barrier flickered and died, and her 3 teammates tumbled out of their prison like the universe's most dysfunctional jack-in-the-box. "Zara," Vorthak exclaimed dramatically, scales shimmering with relief. "You have rescued us. Though I must say, your methods are somewhat." His voice trailed off as he noticed the 12-foot-tall apex predator sitting patiently beside her like an enormous heavily armed therapy dog. "Somewhat unorthodox," he finished weakly. Glix had gone completely still, all 6 arms frozen in mid-gesture as he stared at the Titan wolf. That is the largest terrestrial predator I have ever seen. And it appears to be waiting for you to introduce us?" "Hack friend Zara," Torvin stated in his usual monotone, though there was something that might have been wonder in his rocky voice. "Status, apparently adopted by apex predator pack. Tactical implications, fascinating. Survival probability significantly improved." The Titan wolf studied each of her teammates in turn, then looked at Zara with what she was learning to recognize as a question. She could almost hear the thought process. "These are your packmates, really? Are you sure?" "They're idiots," she said fondly, "but they're my idiots." The great creature seemed to consider this, then made a sound that might have been laughter. It approached Vorthak first, sniffing delicately at the reptilian scales. Vorthak, to his credit, stood perfectly still even though his knees were visibly shaking. After a moment of consideration, the Titan wolf gently touched its nose to Vorthak's forehead in the same gesture of acceptance it had given Zara. "Pack friend Vorthak," Zara translated. "You're being adopted too." The same process was repeated with Glix and Torvin, each receiving the ceremonial nose touch that apparently signified acceptance into whatever complex social structure these creatures maintained. By the time the GSF backup forces arrived 6 hours later, they found a scene that defied all tactical expectations. The Crimson Claw pirates were neatly arranged in zip-tie restraints, their equipment carefully catalogued and secured. The stolen goods had been returned to their proper owners. Even the environmental damage from the mining operations had been partially reversed, with native plants already beginning to reclaim the cleared areas. Nebula's finest sat around a campfire with a pack of apex predators, sharing emergency rations and what appeared to be the galaxy's most improbable interspecies cultural exchange. "So, Captain Rodriguez of the GSF cruiser Vigilant Justice said as he reviewed Zara's after-action report, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You solved an interstellar piracy case by befriending the local wildlife." "The local intelligent wildlife, sir," Zara corrected. "The Verdanian ecosystem operates on a collective intelligence model that we've never encountered before. The Titan wolves aren't just apex predators, they're ecosystem managers. And they just decided to help you?" Zara glanced over at her pack friend, who was currently engaged in what appeared to be a philosophical discussion with Torvin about mineral composition and geological stability. The Titan wolf had taken a particular interest in the rock creature's expertise. "I think they were waiting for someone to treat them as equals instead of obstacles," she said. "The pirates saw them as a problem to be eliminated. My teammates saw them as irrelevant to the mission, but they're people, sir. Different from us, but people nonetheless." Captain Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. "Blake, in 20 years of GSF service, I've never seen anything like this. You've potentially opened up an entirely new category of interspecies relations." "Does this mean I passed my probationary period, sir?" Rodriguez laughed. "Blake, I'm promoting you to senior investigator and putting you in charge of the new interspecies cooperation division. Someone needs to figure out how to replicate what you've accomplished here." As the GSF forces prepared to depart Verdania, Zara found herself facing a difficult goodbye. The Titan wolf pack had gathered at the edge of the forest, their golden eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. Her pack friend approached one final time, lowering its massive head to touch her forehead. The gesture was gentle, affectionate, and unmistakably farewell. "I'll be back," she promised. "This planet is under GSF protection now. No more strip mining, no more exploitation, just, maybe put up some warning signs for future visitors. Something like approach with respect or prepare for educational mauling. The Titan Wolf's rumbling laughter followed them back to their ship. 6 months later, Zara's approach to interspecies cooperation had been adopted as standard GSF protocol for first contact situations. Vorthak had developed an entire training program based on what he called the dramatic art of respectful introduction. Glix had published 17 papers on ecosystem-based collective intelligence. Torvin had been appointed as the GSF's first geological-biological interface specialist. And on Verdania, the forests grew a little taller, the streams ran a little clearer, and occasionally, visitors who approached with respect and offered to share their lunch found themselves with some very impressive backup whenever trouble arose. After all, as Zara had learned, sometimes the best way to deal with apex predators isn't to fight them or avoid them. Sometimes, the best approach is to ask politely if they'd like to be friends.